Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Annie Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Swish Goswami. Hi, Swish.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day here in Toronto. We've had a bit of an extended summer in Canada, I feel. It hasn't actually been snowing, and typically in October we get snow, but it's still really warm out. You can still go out for a walk, so everyone's pretty happy in the city.
That's amazing. I love it. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and when that happens to us, it's awesome. So that's fantastic. So enjoy. Okay, Swish, we get introduced by the one and only Jeremy Wise, Dr. Jeremy Wise. So I need to give him a big shout out from Rise 25. So thank you, Jeremy, for introducing us. And Jeremy said, you gotta interview Swish. He has a great story to tell. He has a great, I'm gonna give you a bio so our listeners can know, and then we're gonna start talking, okay? So basically, you're the former CEO of Surf that got acquired by DataC a few months ago. So we just went through an acquisition. And you're currently the head of growth and marketing at Parallel Studios, which is a venture-backed gaming studio looking to build the next big sci-fi franchise. And Parallel's flagship product is a digital trading card game that can be downloaded on their website or via the Epic Game Store. And the company is backed by the co-founder of YouTube, former CEO of AngelList, former CEO of Blizzard. Beyond Parallel, Swish, you are the best-selling author of The Young Entrepreneur and co-host of the Track Limits podcast, focused on Formula One. Okay, so I need to ask you that first. So tell me about the Formula One podcast. I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, it was a very fun story. I have some best friends in Toronto, Henny, Fevin, and Mikey, and we were at the 2022 Canadian Grand Prix, and we were in Montreal. We were enjoying ourselves, having a great time. And I think it was probably the Thursday or the Friday, we were at a restaurant and we thought, we keep talking about Formula One. We're huge fans of the sport. We attend races. We watch every single race, even if we're not there, we're watching it. We're getting up at 7, 8 a.m. to watch a race on a Sunday. Why don't we take what we're chatting about and actually do something with it in terms of sharing that with our community? And so we thought a podcast would be great. We didn't just want to start any type of podcast, though. I think for us, we all wanted to do something different in the motor space, in the motorsport, in the Formula One space. There are a lot of podcasts that are fully virtual. They are podcasts that are very fun and very oriented towards humor. For us, I think what we wanted to do was make sure that the podcast was the highest quality out there, meaning we bought equipment from scratch, we flew to wherever our guests were located, and we recorded in person. We try to ask questions typically that no other podcast would ask their guests. So we do a lot of meticulous research to make sure that we were asking different questions. And on top of that, we try to keep the podcast balanced between being fun and humorous, but also exploring, some pretty serious themes around gender and racial representation in motorsport, income inequality in motorsport, and also mental health, and specifically the mental health of the athletes that are involved in the sport. So it's been a super fun journey. We are in the midst of releasing season 2 right now. I think we're 40 episodes into season 2. We're going to go back out to Europe in January and February of 2025 to record season 3 and start releasing season 3 episodes in March of 2025.
I love it. What's the most interesting question that you ever asked one of your guests?
We found out that one of our guests hadn't actually shared that they had gotten a contract from a very reputed team. So at the time they were driving for Red Bull Racing, they had the opportunity to actually drive for Ferrari. And if you're a Formula One driver, or just for that matter, if you're any aspiring driver, the team you probably want to drive for is Ferrari, right? They're the most well-known team in the world, the most historical, legacy-rich team in the world. And we asked that question to the driver, saying, "Is that actually true? Is it true that you were given a Ferrari contract and you decided to say no? And then 6 months after you said no, you were fired by Red Bull." And so sadly, that was true, but it was incredible to have that news confirmed on our podcast because that kind of went viral. A bunch of articles were written about it. A bunch of other pages picked it up and started talking about the story from our podcast.
That's pretty amazing. Absolutely. All right. So surf, when did you actually when did you start surf?
2019, August of 2019, it started off as a company called Trufan, Trufan. So different name, different product, honestly. We started as a social media analytics company. So we built a platform that allowed people to integrate their Twitter and Instagram data to find who their most influential and engaged followers were. So we wanted a very simple tool that allowed you to find your quote unquote true fans. I think over the years, though, especially in 2020 and 2021, we pivoted away from that because of dependency on Instagram and Twitter, which made it really hard to run a venture-backed company. Because a big question investors would ask is like, what if Instagram does this? Or what if Instagram and Twitter turn off their API access and now you don't have data anymore to supply to your customers? So we started moving more down the path of creating insights based on data sets that we owned ourselves. And we primarily did that within web data. In 2021, we released an extension, a browser extension called Surf that you could download on Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Opera, Brave, Microsoft Edge, etc. And you'd be able to download that extension, share your web data anonymously, and get points back, which you could then use for rewards like items and gift cards. So it's very cool to kind of create a new standard for privacy. Not only did we want consumers to know what they were sharing and have the ability to manage what they do and don't share, but we wanted to compensate people for the data they were willing to share and give them something tangible, which is something no other platform did previously.
Amazing. So when you started the company, when you started Surf in 2019, did you have the idea, like, did you do it with the idea of actually exiting? Like you exited 5 years later, right? So did you have the idea that you were going to exit and that's what you're going to do?
I don't think so. I don't think anyone, by the way, should come into business with that mindset because, it doesn't usually happen, right? Most of the time, actually, a majority of companies fail after their first year and they don't even get to year one. So for us, I think when we started, we just wanted to build something cool. Both me and my co-founder actually dropped out of university to build this company. And we wanted to just first and foremost build something valuable. We wanted to obviously be independent financially so that we didn't have to rely on our parents. And I think as the years went on, we started realizing, well, can we build this? Can we continue to grow this into something much, much bigger? And I think at the point where we sold the business, we realized that there was a cap. There was a cap on kind of what we had done in terms of both where the idea could go and also our energy in terms of what we were willing to commit to the project. And I think we kind of hit a cap on both sides. And that's where we took the decision earlier in 2024 to sell the business and went through an entire process, speaking to multiple buyers, went through a horror story where we actually got a letter of intent from a buyer that ended up falling through and then having to go and find another buyer in a very short period of time. But thankfully, we were able to get over the finish line.
That's amazing. So we have listeners, entrepreneurs. The dream of the entrepreneur definitely is to be able to sell good, sell well. And then, I mean, not every entrepreneur, but that's usually like, that's the case. I interviewed many entrepreneurs, met with many of them. And you want to basically sell, be able to actually have an asset that you can sell and then move on to your next game, that's what you're doing, no pun intended. But so what advice would you give to our listeners in terms of what you learned, lessons learned through this merger and through this acquisition process?
Yeah, I think it's important if you are going down the path of selling your business to be fully ready to sell your business. I think early on in February and March of 2024, when my co-founder and I came together and we said, okay, we want to sell Surf, I think we were still hesitating because we felt so attached to the idea. We felt so attached to our team. We felt very attached to our investors and advisors. So we obviously wanted to see if there was still an alternative way to just continue to grow the business, but we knew A, there wasn't, and B, our mindset and our energy just wasn't there to continue going. So I think it was only around April where we kind of fully locked in and said, okay, you know what, we're going to do this. And I think it's important to do that. You need to be super focused on, I'm going to sell this business, because if you're just hovering between, oh, I'm going to sell the business, and then the next day you're like, I don't really want to. And then you say, no, I want to. It's going to create all sorts of problems internally for you and not allow you to focus.
That
The
makes
second
total
thing,
sense. It's making the decision is the
yeah,
first one. Now, you said that you
yeah.
realized that you can't grow the business anymore. Like, what led you, walk me through this thought process of like, what did you see in the business that led you to really think that you can't grow it anymore, or you can't expand it anymore?
I think we had tapped into a big segment within the market already, and in order to expand that segment would take a lot more time. Both me and my co-founder, again, we started the business in our early 20s. Now I'm in my late 20s. I'm 27. And I think for us, if we looked at kind of, okay, what do we want to be doing in our 30s? What do we want to be doing in our 40s? That kind of interest in building out surf and growing it wasn't there anymore.
It's
So
really
in
the
order to
interest.
expand,
Like you said, the burnout, the interest, or the lack of, I mean, you don't want to invest any more of the energy. You maybe not burnout, but you
yeah,
invested
I
as
don't think
much
it's
as you
burnout.
can and now move out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not only that, right? It's okay. Well, we know we can obviously grow it to a bigger business, and there was a plan that we had put in place of how we would be able to expand our customer segment, what new product lines we'd have to start, how we go about potentially fundraising again next year. But in order to do all of that, I'd also have to now commit the next 5 to 10 years of my life doing that. So it came with a price in terms of spending a lot more years of my life going forward on this. And that's where it's not burnout as much as I think it is, like you said, interest. Is your interest so high? Is it so deep that you want to then now continue on and spend the next 5, 10 years of your life growing this? And again, even that is still unpredictable, especially in today's world where markets have gone, from very, very healthy to a pandemic to a market recession. It's been a very volatile market, and it's definitely affected my mental health as an operator, having to go back out and fundraise in some pretty tumultuous times.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so you make the decision, don't waver from it. What other lessons have you learned?
Yeah, don't waver from it. And then I think secondly is obviously it's great to have multiple buyers at the table. So try to talk to everyone and everyone. So ask for intros wherever you can. Try to be organized before you even ask for an intro though. Like have a data room, have like a confidential information memorandum or quote unquote a deck that summarizes here's what we built, here's the traction so far, here's what we're exactly selling, and here's the value of it. Try to have your financials all in order, right? To make sure that you have your tax returns from previous years filed, and you have those in the data room. You have your balance sheet, your cash flow, your P&L statements all updated, and you're constantly updating that even throughout the process. And that I think makes it so that when you are speaking to a buyer and they do say they're interested, you can move 10 times quicker when you have all of those materials put into a data room already. And the final piece of advice I'll give is try to grow while you're going through the fundraising process. So try to like when you're going through the fundraising process to not just stall, right? To not just not show any user growth or no customer growth. If you can show that even while going through the M&A process, you're adding a customer here and there, and you're showing that growth trajectory even on a minuscule level while you're talking to buyers, that's a huge signal for them to say, okay, yeah, these guys are great. It's not only a business that's stagnated, it's a business that's actively growing each month despite them focusing on the M&A side.
That makes total sense. We work with many businesses that are going through the M&A because what we do is we document processes and procedures, and having well-documented processes and procedures definitely helps tremendously with the M&A cycle, because when a buyer comes in and sees the processes, they understand what's happening in the business. Like you said, you have to continue growing the business. You have to also show that the business is transferable, and that if somebody comes in, they will be able to operate it. What's your thought about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to find the right people for your business. And at the end of the day, like for our situation, thankfully, we didn't have to carry over. And I think there was more interest, honestly, in having us as advisors, like my co-founder and I, than having us as operators. That being said, there was an interest in obviously carrying over other members of our team, specifically on the product side. But that is entirely up to the buyer in terms of figuring out A, the culture fit, and then B, what they need and what they don't need.
Right. And having those processes really help with that in
Yeah.
terms of carrying it over. I agree 100%. Okay, so you
Yeah.
sold the business, and then how did you find a new your new adventure? Like what process did you go through in order to actually find the next thing to do?
Yeah, it wasn't honestly too hard. One of my investors at Surf actually is the co-founder of Parallel. So when he kind of saw that we were going through this process of selling the business, he reached out and said, "Hey, what do you have planned for your next chapter?" Told him a little bit about, some of the ideas I was interested in. I did tell him that I didn't want to go back out and build a business right away. I want to lean into my expertise, which is primarily on the growth and marketing side. And that's what I did even before Surf. Um, so I wanted to do that and I wanted to be very focused on that. And he thought there was an absolute fit in terms of, getting a leader for the marketing team. When I joined Parallel, honestly, they didn't really have much of a marketing team, but it's been great. I've been able to hire out my own team. We're a team of 11 in the growth and marketing department. I was able to bring over some people even who worked with me at Surf on the marketing team to Parallel. And it's been great also to have the autonomy to be able to come up with my own strategy and execute my own strategy. I've been very happy being here because I almost feel like I'm an entrepreneur without having maybe the need to go and fundraise and do all of those obligations that came with being an entrepreneur.
I mean,
So
that's
that's
my
been pretty
question
great.
too, is like, how do you make that transition from being an entrepreneur to now being part, basically employed?
Yep. Yeah, it depends on the culture, right? Because I think some places, yeah, I was definitely nervous about going and working at a company because some places might be very restrictive in terms of what they do and don't let you do, and you have to follow a very specific model. But with Parallel, I found kind of the opposite. I found that like, A, there wasn't really much of a marketing team or strategy when I joined. It was all fairly disorganized. So my first goal was bring in the right people and take on the right strategy and make sure that we execute on it every single month. And then now that I've done that, I have a lot more leniency now to even take big bets if I want to. A big thing that the co-founders allow me to do is if there's a big opportunity on the marketing and growth side, and it comes with a big price tag, as long as I can briefly justify that to the rest of the team, I'm allowed to go forward and do it. And obviously, if it doesn't work, I'll hear the consequences of that in terms of let's learn from the mistakes. But if it does work, obviously that's great, and I obviously can continue to do that. So there is a very big degree of trust among the management team, and it's nice to be on that management team. So I still have some ability to make big decisions on my own without needing anyone else to be there.
Absolutely. Wow, what a journey. Well, Swish, if
Yeah.
our listeners, I mean, and you wrote the book, so let's talk about the book. I forgot to mention the
Mhm.
book. So what inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, I wrote the book. I mean, honestly, I got the book deal when I was 21, so it was a long time ago now, 6 years ago. And when I signed the deal, it was primarily because I was in kind of my college years and I dropped out and I was 1 year into building Surf. And I thought it might be great, take a look at all the lessons I've learned within 1 year of building Surf and put it into a book. What was very cool though is that I actually eventually wrote that book over the course of like 4 or 5 years, and I only released it in 2022. And it was very nice to be able to almost put my 20 to 25-year-old mindset around networking, personal branding, mental health, building a business, fundraising, managing a team, meeting and hiring team members, all in this book. I wrote it with my co-author Quinn, and he was my college best friend. He's also an entrepreneur. He ended up selling his business to Qualtrics and moving to Seattle. And it was very cool for us to be able to write the book together because we were obviously such good friends, but we also had the opportunity while writing the book to kind of share how we did things and how he did things and compare notes to each other.
That's beautiful. Who should buy the book?
Ideally, if you're a young entrepreneur, even if you're not an entrepreneur, if you're just aspiring to build something, it's a very neat read. I also don't think it needs to be catered, honestly, for young people. I think even if you're in your 30s and 40s, you'll probably find some value in it. And it's worth noting the book is, written in a way where you don't have to read it from cover to cover. There's specific chapters where if you just wanted to open the book and go right to that chapter to learn about fundraising, for example, or if you wanted to go right into the M&A section and learn about exiting a business, you can go right to that section without having to read the book cover to cover, which is nice.
Beautiful. So we'll include obviously a link to the book so people can just go and buy it. I recommend
Yeah.
that they do. And if they want to get a hold of you, ask you questions, what's the best way to reach you?
Typically LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's the main platform I enjoy posting content on as well. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll definitely get back to you.
Awesome. Well, Swish, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast and answering all these questions that were, coming at you, but you did fantastic. So thank you so much. And I'm sure our listeners learned a lot from your experience and what you shared. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.